My wife said, "Don't come to my office party. It'll be awkward with my ex there." I said, "Of course I'll stay home." What she didn't know was that I was the new regional supply chain director. Her boss invited me as a surprise guest, and when I walked in and she saw who was sitting next to me, her face went pale. Hey viewers, before we move on to the video, please make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button if you want to see more stories like this. Thanks. I'm Jackson Palmer, 35, and I've been married to Melissa for 5 years. We met through mutual friends at a Tampa Bay Lightning game in our late 20s, got married after a 2-year courtship, and I thought we had the kind of partnership that could weather anything, the kind where we finished each other's sentences and made decisions together without argument. I was wrong. 4 weeks ago, Melissa came home from her marketing coordinator job at Tampa Bay Nutrition Distribution, acting different. Not suspicious different, excited different. She was practically glowing when she walked through the door, checking her phone with this little smile I hadn't seen in months. When I asked what had her so animated, she'd just say, "Work stuff," and change the subject before disappearing into the bathroom to freshen up from her day. I didn't think much of it initially. Melissa had always been social with her coworkers, the type who remembered everyone's birthdays and organized baby showers. Their annual holiday party was coming up, and she'd been on the planning committee for 3 years running. The extra phone time seemed normal for someone coordinating vendors and entertainment. I should mention that I'd been working a hybrid schedule for the past 2 years. 3 days at home managing logistics operations, 2 days in our downtown Tampa office for face-to-face meetings. The arrangement had been perfect for us. I made $95K annually, which was decent but not extravagant. We were feeling the financial pressure that hits couples our age. We had $45K saved toward a down payment on a $280K house in Westchase, one of those newer developments with good schools. The kind of place where we could start the family Melissa had been hinting about more frequently. At 32, she felt the biological clock ticking louder each month. "All my friends are pregnant or have toddlers," she'd say while scrolling through Facebook. "I'm tired of being the only one at brunches who can't talk about preschool applications." I understood the pressure. We'd agreed to start trying after we closed on the house, sometime next spring. Then last Tuesday, she dropped the bomb while I was reviewing our mortgage pre-approval paperwork at the kitchen table. The documents were spread out like a financial roadmap to our future. Credit reports, bank statements, salary verification letters. I was double-checking the debt-to-income ratios when she cleared her throat. "Hey, so about the office party on Friday," she started, leaning against the granite counter we'd splurged on when we renovated the kitchen last year. Her voice had that careful tone people use when they're about to ask for something they're not sure you'll agree to. I looked up from the paperwork, pen still in my hand. "What about it?" She hesitated, picking at her manicured nails, a nervous habit I'd noticed developing over the past month. "I think maybe you should skip it this year." "What? Why?" I set down the pen, giving her my full attention. In 3 previous years, I'd attended every company event. Hell, I'd helped her win the costume contest at their Halloween party dressed as Johnny and June Cash. It's just, Brandon's going to be there. Brandon Pierce. The name hit me like a small electric shock, though I tried not to show it. Her ex-boyfriend from their mid-20s, the guy she'd dated for 18 months before he moved to Seattle for some sales position. According to Melissa, it had ended amicably when his career took him west. Mutual agreement that long distance wouldn't work. I'd never met the guy, never even seen a picture, which had always struck me as odd but not concerning. "Okay," I said slowly, trying to read her expression. "And I just think it would be awkward. You know how exes at work events can be." She was avoiding eye contact now, focusing on something fascinating about our backsplash tiles. "I don't want any weird tension ruining the night. It's better if I just go, have a drink with the team, and come home early." Something in her tone set off alarm bells I didn't want to acknowledge. My stomach tightened, but I pushed the feeling down. "Melissa, we've been married 5 years. Why would I care about some guy you dated almost a decade ago?" "You wouldn't," she said quickly, "but he might. He's been acting kind of nostalgic lately, asking about my life, commenting on old photos on LinkedIn, professional stuff, but still, I just want to avoid drama." I felt my jaw clench involuntarily. "If he's making you uncomfortable, maybe you should report it to HR." "It's not that serious," she said, the words tumbling out faster than normal. "I just think it's easier if you're not there. Please, Jackson, just this once." I agreed. Like an idiot, I agreed because I trusted her. Because in 5 years of marriage, she'd never given me a reason not to. Because I believed that our relationship was strong enough to weather whatever awkwardness some ex-boyfriend might create. What Melissa didn't know was that 6 weeks earlier, I'd been quietly headhunted for a position that would change everything. A recruiter had found my profile on LinkedIn and reached out about a regional supply chain director position at Tampa Bay Nutrition Distribution, Melissa's company. The irony wasn't lost on me, but I'd kept quiet about it. The position would bump me to $130K annually and put me in charge of operations across 3 states, Florida, Georgia, and Alabama. It was the kind of career leap that could accelerate our timeline for everything: the house, the family, the financial security we'd been working toward. The interview process had been intensive. 3 rounds with corporate headquarters, not the local facility where Melissa worked. I'd met with the CEO, Howard Walsh, twice. The man was sharp, direct, and clearly looking for someone who could streamline their supply chain inefficiencies. During our final meeting, he'd been impressed with my analysis of their distribution bottlenecks and my proposals for cost reduction. "Jackson, I'm going to be frank," Howard had said, leaning back in his leather chair. "We've been hemorrhaging money on logistics for 2 years. You're the first candidate who's shown me a concrete plan to fix it." I'd accepted the position 2 weeks ago, scheduled to start the Monday after their holiday party. Howard himself had extended the invitation to attend the party as a surprise introduction to the regional staff, including Melissa's marketing department. "It'll be good for you to meet the team in a relaxed setting," he had explained. "Get a feel for the company culture before you dive into the operational challenges." I hadn't told Melissa yet because I wanted to surprise her. I'd been planning it for weeks, walking into that party, seeing her face light up when she realized her husband had just landed his dream job at her company. I imagined her pride, her excitement about what this meant for our future. I thought she'd be thrilled that I'd finally broken through to the executive level, that we could start looking at houses in better neighborhoods, maybe even consider the private schools for the kids we'd have. I should have known something was wrong when she started spending more time getting ready for work. Melissa had always been put together, but lately, she'd been leaving the house looking like she was going to client meetings instead of internal marketing coordination. New dresses I hadn't seen before, more attention to her hair and makeup, subtle but noticeable changes. Friday night arrived with typical Florida December weather, warm and humid, nothing like the Christmas party atmosphere you'd expect up north. Melissa spent 2 hours getting ready, which wasn't unusual for a company event, but she was more meticulous than normal. She stood in front of our bedroom mirror for 20 minutes, adjusting and readjusting a navy dress I'd never seen before. "Is that new?" I asked, looking up from my phone where I'd been reading quarterly supply chain reports to prepare for Monday. "This old thing," she said, but her voice had that forced casualness people use when they're lying. "I've had it forever." The dress wasn't inappropriate, but it was definitely more form-fitting than her usual work attire. It hugged curves I'd been taking for granted, made her look like the woman I'd fallen for 7 years ago at that Lightning game. For a moment, I felt a pang of guilt. When was the last time we'd gone? Somewhere that required her to dress up for me? She kissed me goodbye, a quick peck that barely registered as contact, told me to enjoy the golf highlights on ESPN, and left. I waited an hour, then got dressed myself in the navy suit I'd bought specifically for my first day as regional director. Howard had arranged for a company car to pick me up, a black sedan that felt like overkill for a 10-minute drive to the Marriott downtown. The driver, a chatty guy named Luis, made conversation about Tampa traffic and the Lightning's playoff chances. I only half listened, my mind racing through everything that could go right or wrong at this party. I arrived at the Harborview Ballroom around 8:30. The space was elegant, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Tampa Bay, soft lighting, and a jazz quartet playing in the corner. About 100 people milled around, drinking wine and making the kind of small talk that happens at corporate events. I could smell expensive perfume and aftershave mixing with the catered food. Howard spotted me immediately when I walked in. He was holding court near the executive table, a distinguished man in his early 60s with silver hair and the kind of confident presence that made people gravitate toward him. He waved me over with enthusiasm. "There's our new director," he called out as I approached. That's when I saw him, Brandon Pierce, sitting right next to where Howard was gesturing for me to sit. My first impression was exactly what I'd expected from Melissa's description years ago, though she'd been diplomatically vague. Brandon was about my height, maybe 6'1", with the kind of gym-sculpted build that suggested he spent more time working out than I did. His handshake was firm, the practiced grip of someone who'd spent years in sales, designed to convey confidence and trustworthiness. "Jackson, meet Brandon Pierce," Howard said as we shook hands. "Brandon's our new VP of sales. Just relocated back from Seattle last month. Brandon, this is Jackson Palmer, the guy I told you about." "Great to meet you, Jackson," Brandon said with the kind of confident smile that sales executives perfect over years of client meetings. "Howard's told me great things. You're going to love the team here. Really solid people, great company culture." "Jackson starts Monday," Howard announced to the small group of executives gathered around our table. "Thought it would be good for him to meet everyone tonight, get a feel for how we operate before he dives into the supply chain challenges." I made polite conversation while my eyes swept the room, looking for Melissa. The ballroom was packed with employees I didn't recognize, all dressed in their holiday party best. Conversations flowed over wine glasses and cocktail plates, the kind of networking that happens when alcohol loosens professional boundaries. I found her near the bar with 3 other women from her department, laughing at something one of them had said. She looked relaxed, animated even, gesturing with her wine glass as she told what appeared to be an entertaining story. She looked beautiful, genuinely happy in a way I hadn't seen at home in weeks. The sight should have made me smile, but something about it felt wrong, like watching a performance I wasn't supposed to see. She hadn't noticed me yet, too engrossed in whatever conversation was happening around the high-top table where her group had gathered. Then Brandon's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and smiled. Not just any smile, but the kind of satisfied, almost predatory expression that made my stomach clench. His fingers moved quickly across the screen as he typed a response, and I watched his face light up with anticipation. "Your wife here tonight?" Howard asked Brandon casually, making conversation while he scanned the room for people to introduce me to. "Divorced, actually," Brandon said, still looking at his phone with that unsettling smile. 2 years now, but I'm working on something promising." He glanced toward the bar area, and I followed his gaze directly to Melissa. My blood went cold. Every nerve in my body suddenly felt hyper-aware, like someone had just turned up the voltage on my entire nervous system. "Oh yeah?" Howard said, completely oblivious to my reaction. "Anyone I know?" Brandon leaned closer to our small group, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "Let's just say I'm rekindling an old flame. We dated years ago before she got married." He paused, glancing around to make sure no one else was listening. "Her husband's some operations guy who works from home half the time, barely pays attention to her anymore. She's been receptive to my advances." The words hit me like physical blows. My hands gripped the edge of the table so hard I could feel my knuckles going white. The background noise of the party, conversations, laughter, the jazz quartet, seemed to fade into a distant hum. I remember Howard saying my name, probably noticing the expression on my face, but his voice sounded like it was coming from underwater. I stood up slowly, deliberately, the way you move when you're trying to maintain control over every muscle in your body. "Excuse me for a moment," I said, surprised by how normal my voice sounded. I walked toward the bar with Brandon following behind me, still talking about quarterly sales projections and market penetration strategies. He was completely unaware of where I was heading, lost in his own corporate small talk. Melissa saw me when I was about 10 feet away. The transformation on her face was instantaneous and devastating. Color drained from her cheeks so quickly I thought she might faint. Her wine glass, a nearly full glass of white wine, slipped from her fingers and shattered on the marble floor with a crystalline crash that seemed to echo through the immediate area. "Jackson!" Her voice came out as barely a whisper, full of shock and something that looked like pure terror. Her coworkers turned to look. At the broken glass, then followed her gaze to me. The conversation at their table died abruptly, creating a pocket of silence in the otherwise busy room. Brandon stopped mid-sentence about customer acquisition costs when he realized where I was heading and saw Melissa's reaction. "Wait," he said, confusion creeping into his voice. "Do you know Melissa?" "I do," I said calmly, turning to face him, while maintaining the kind of controlled tone I'd learned to use in difficult business meetings. "I don't think you've met Brandon, honey." I gestured between them like I was making introductions at a dinner party. "She was just telling me about the old flame she's been rekindling. The married one, with the operations husband who works from home." I watched the realization hit Brandon like a freight train traveling at full speed. His confident sales expression crumbled, replaced by the kind of panic that happens when someone realizes they have made a catastrophic mistake. His eyes went wide, flicking rapidly between Melissa and me as his brain processed what was happening. "No," he said quietly, his voice barely audible. You're Jackson. Regional Supply Chain Director Jackson," I clarified, feeling strangely calm despite the adrenaline flooding my system. "Your new boss's boss, actually, starting Monday." The silence around us was expanding as more people noticed something dramatic was happening. Someone had turned down the music slightly, whether intentionally or coincidentally, I couldn't tell. Melissa's coworkers had gone completely silent, forming an unconscious circle around us. I could feel dozens of eyes watching, phones probably being discreetly pulled out to record what was clearly about to become office legend. "Jackson, please," Melissa started, reaching for my arm with a trembling hand. "It's not what you think." "Really?" I pulled out my phone with deliberate slowness, the way you might handle evidence at a crime scene. "Because you told me to stay home so it wouldn't be awkward with your ex. But Brandon here just told me you've been receptive to his advances. Which one of you wants to fill in the blanks?" Brandon held up his hands in surrender, his sales confidence completely evaporated. "Look, man, I had no idea who you were. She told me the marriage was basically over, that you two were living separate lives, and she was planning to leave." The words hung in the air like smoke. I looked at Melissa, studying her face for any sign of denial, any indication that Brandon was lying. Her silence told me everything I needed to know. "We've been texting for 4 weeks, Brandon continued, apparently deciding that complete honesty was his only path to survival now. "Since I got back to town. She said you didn't pay attention to her anymore, that you were always working, that she felt invisible in the marriage." 4 weeks, I repeated, letting the timeline sink in. "So, right around the time I told you I was interviewing for local positions because I wanted to be more present in our marriage." Melissa's eyes filled with tears, but I felt nothing. No sympathy, no urge to comfort her. Just a cold clarity that I'd never experienced before. "Jackson, I'm sorry," she said, her voice breaking. "I didn't mean for it to happen this way. We haven't actually done anything physical. It was just talking, just texting." I pulled up my phone again and called our cell phone carrier's customer service line, putting it on speaker right there in front of everyone. The move was calculated, designed to maximize impact. "Verizon customer service, this is Janet. How can I help you tonight?" "Hi, Janet. I need to request detailed text message records for my account," I said clearly, making sure everyone in our expanding audience could hear. "All messages from my wife's number for the past 2 months." Melissa lunged for my phone, panic overtaking whatever composure she had left. I stepped back, keeping the device out of her reach. "Sir, I can process that request, but it will take 3 to 5 business days for standard accounts," Janet said professionally. "I have a premium business account," I replied. "How quickly can you expedite it?" "For premium accounts, we can have those to you by tomorrow morning." "Perfect. Please send them to the email address on file." "Certainly, sir. Is there anything else I can help you with tonight?" "No, that covers everything. Thank you, Janet." I hung up and looked around the circle that had formed. Half the marketing department was now watching, along with several executives I didn't recognize. Well, this has been educational. I didn't stay for the rest of the party. I found Howard and told him I had a family emergency and would explain everything Monday. He looked concerned but nodded, understanding that whatever was happening needed to be handled privately. As I walked toward the exit, I could hear Melissa calling my name, but I didn't turn around. The sound of her voice felt like background noise now, irrelevant to whatever came next. I drove straight to my brother Kevin's house in Hyde Park. He took one look at my face and handed me a beer without asking questions. His wife, Sarah, disappeared upstairs to give us privacy. "Rough night?" Kevin asked. "You could say that." Saturday morning, my premium account came through exactly as promised. The text records arrived in my email as a 47-page PDF attachment. I spent 3 hours at Kevin's kitchen table, reading through everything while his family was at their daughter's soccer game. It was worse than I'd imagined. They hadn't slept together yet, but they'd planned to next weekend. Brandon had booked a suite at the Grand Hyatt downtown. Melissa had told him she'd tell me she was attending a marketing conference in Orlando, complete with a fabricated agenda and fake hotel reservation confirmations. The messages were explicit about what they wanted to do to each other, but what hurt more were the messages about me. Melissa complaining that I had gotten comfortable in our marriage, that I'd gained weight and lost ambition. The weight comment stung. I'd put on maybe 15 pounds since we got married, hardly unusual for a guy in his mid-30s. There were detailed complaints about our sex life, our social life, my weekend golf habits. She told Brandon that I was more interested in watching golf tournaments than planning romantic evenings with her. The golf thing was particularly painful because I'd only started watching it to give her space on weekends when she said she needed time to decompress from work stress. By Wednesday, Brandon was terminated. Corporate had launched a full investigation triggered by Friday night's incident, and they'd discovered he'd been falsifying expense reports to the tune of $1,200 over 6 months. Personal dinners, entertainment, even a weekend trip to Miami, all billed to the company while he was supposedly developing client relationships. The affair might have been forgivable from a corporate perspective, but financial fraud wasn't. Howard called me personally to explain the decision. "Jackson, I want you to know this isn't about Friday night," he said. "We would have found this eventually during our quarterly audits. Your situation just accelerated the timeline. I filed for divorce the following Friday. Florida's no-fault laws meant I didn't need to prove adultery, but I filed with grounds anyway. My lawyer said the text records would ensure a clean settlement in my favor. 3 months later, I'm doing better than I expected. The house in West Chase came through, and I'm living there alone now, settling into a routine that feels more peaceful than anything I experienced in the last year of my marriage. Work has been challenging, but rewarding. I've streamlined their distribution network and cut logistics costs by 18% in my first quarter. Sometimes I think about that moment when Melissa's face went pale, when she realized her careful planning had imploded in the worst possible way. I don't take pleasure in her pain, but there was justice in that moment. Not revenge, just truth finally breaking through layers of deception. I'm not bitter anymore, just focused on building something better. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. Thanks for watching.